I'll be talking today I want to wrap up. I have a slide deck. I want to run through it as quickly as possible and then see whether we have some Q&A at the end. I believe we have about an hour. The topic is something which is close to my heart, which is around social capital and entrepreneurial success, which is something which I've done a bit of research on. But what I'm going to talk to you today is more about a talk which is aimed at practitioners. Okay. So let me get started. Just some brief idea, what is entrepreneurship? So if you were to ask this question, let's use this definition. Entrepreneurship means starting a new business. Okay, so let's keep that as the definition, which then leads us to a bunch of other questions such as how innovative is that new business? How risky is it for you personally, right? So, and then is it for growth? Are you creating a new organization, or are you doing it for a lifestyle purpose? Or are you doing it for necessity, right? Because you have nothing else. You don't have any other job, so you're forced to be a necessity type of entrepreneur. So these are important questions to ask because this Kirana store owner in a typical street in India, in any Indian city, he's definitely an entrepreneur. Much of the time they could be entrepreneurs because of necessity, right? They don't have any other alternative and therefore doing this. Is it risky for them personally? Absolutely, it is, because their capital is tied up into this business. Is it innovative? Maybe not so much, because one Kirana store is more or less like another one. There is some element of innovation in terms of what is being stocked and what are the SKUs and where is the location and so on and so forth. But I would put it as less innovative on the spectrum of innovation, but definitely risky for that individual personally. In contrast, if you look at this company, I just pulled it off the web this today, a company called Gray Orange Robotics. I know about it because I did my undergraduate in BITS Pilani long time ago, and this one of the founders, or I think both the founders are from BITS, and I chatted with one of them long time ago. It's a robotics company, very innovative in technology terms, right? Highly innovative. I'm not so sure it is risky for them personally because the founders they put in their sweat equity into it. They did not put their own capital into it. They do have reputation risks, but somebody else, professional investors, put in money, right? So in that sense, financial risk is low, but innovation is high, and they're trying to build a growth venture. Similarly, many of you would have used Ola in Chennai or wherever else. Again, this is a company that has, I would say, a moderate amount of technology, right? There is some platform and riders are coming together with passengers to do the matching. Again, they have sweat equity, but somebody else invested money, right? Venture capitalists invested money. So if you think about it, you can think about entrepreneurship along at least two dimensions: the innovativeness that it brings, the new venture, the new business, and also how risky is it for you personally. The Kirana store is really highly risky for that individual, although not very innovative, probably doing it for necessity because they don't have any other way to make a living. But there is also increasingly a breed of people that we can call as lifestyle entrepreneurs. And there are many such people in India today and all over the world. Like there's a whole YouTube ecosystem on people running on channels, right? Making living out of running stuff. They could be sitting in Goa, they could be sitting in Bali, they have a computer with internet, and that's really what they're doing for a living. Right. So again, the lifestyle entrepreneur is a little bit like the Kirana store person in the sense that there is no aspiration to grow and build an organization and have 100 and 1,000 people on their payroll, but they're doing something probably innovative and don't want to be tied down to an employer. So there are many different ways in which we can think of this idea of entrepreneurship. But irrespective of whichever way you think about it, what I want you to kind of understand is there is something common about the process of entrepreneurship, and there's one strong element which is involved in success, which is the social capital aspect. So what is that process that's involved in entrepreneurship? It is very easy for me as a professor or Arushi as a student to tell you. and you are the ones who are actually doing it. So doing it is a lot more difficult. It's easy for me to talk, it's more difficult for you to do. So what are the kind of, conceptually speaking, what's involved in entrepreneurship? Well, it's very easy, so to speak. The first step is there is opportunity. Somewhere you have to spot a good opportunity, you got to solve a problem which is currently unsolved for some set of users in some innovative way, especially if you want to build a growth venture and attract venture capital, angel investment, and all of that. So the opportunity aspect is quite important, step one. And step two, again, very easy, go and execute. Right? So go and execute well. You have the idea in your head. There is at least one important transition, which is moving from the idea in your head into an up and running business. Right? And then, you have an operating entity with some revenue maybe. Then how do you grow that infant venture to a more viable, larger startup, right? Larger business. So you can think of it as spot an opportunity, execute on it to convert the idea into an infant, and then scale up the infant into a viable business. So the interesting thing is that social capital is something which is kind of a hidden foundation for entrepreneurial success. I don't know how many of you have been to Singapore, but there's this very iconic building in Singapore. It's called Marina Bay Sands. And that's this building here, these 3 towers, and there's a little big boat on top of the towers. That's called Marina Bay Sands. I have been in Singapore for a long time, and I saw this building being constructed. When it was constructed, it looked like this. You had the foundations and the steel columns, right? You don't see that now. You see all this glitzy, wonderful building, but the thing that's holding the whole building together is this hidden foundations. And oftentimes on social capital is like that. It's the hidden foundation behind a successful Ola, behind a successful, gray orange robotics or any other venture that is doing very well. If you go and dig deeper, you will find that the founder's social capital was super important to get it off the ground. And there are at least a couple of ways in which it's important. We talked about 2 steps, right? We talked about you got to find an opportunity, you got to spot a good opportunity. How do you spot good opportunities? Right? How do you spot good opportunities? Well, you require access to human beings who have interesting problems or solutions to interesting problems. And you, of course, need your own alertness, right? You need to be alert to problems that users have. But important thing is access to people with interesting problems or solutions to those problems, right? So where is that coming from? That's coming from the people your networks, right? Your social capital. So step one, spotting an opportunity requires some social capital. Similarly, executing well also requires a lot of social capital because you need to turn to people you trust who to do favors for you, to help you out in sticky situations. And then as your business grows, you need to adapt your own connections so that you grow with the business. So which is why for the rest of the talk, I want you to have this very, very neutral definition of networks and networking. Think about networks or networking as a process of creating a fabric of connections or personal contacts who will open doors for you, who will provide support, feedback, insight, resources, information, all of that as you go about trying to build your business. Now, when you are an entrepreneur and trying to build a business, you might think about it as in the following way. Imagine you as a center and you have concentric circles around you. There are some people whom you can call as your inner circle. These are your trusted, really rock solid connections. Then you can think of people at the very periphery of your network. These are folks who you say hi, bye, and so on, but you don't have a very deep connection to them. That's the outer circle, and then you have in between your middle circle and so on. So what I want to focus on today is on your inner circle. Okay, the people immediately around you that you depend on, that you trust, and for who will actually try the best to help you out. So when I tell you about your inner circle and ask you, do you have a good network? Okay, when I ask you this question, do you have a good network? I want you to think about 2 things. The first thing is, does your network give you access to valuable private information? Okay, so that's the first important point. And the second important point is, does your network give you access to skills and information that you don't have that's important? Okay, so the first point is access to valuable private information, and the second is access to valuable skills and expertise that you don't have. And it's costly for you to acquire that valuable skills and expertise, right? So what do we mean by valuable private information? Well, one way to define it is private information is everything that's not public. If you can go to Google Chacha and then type out, something, and the Google gives you an answer, that is public information. Okay, so private information, on the other hand, is information that is emergent information. It's information that is being discussed in meetings such as these. It's not yet structured. It is information whose veracity is hard to ascertain. We don't know. It's hard. The reliability of the information is hard to ascertain. So what might be examples? Well, I can give you an example. I don't know how many of you are entrepreneurs, but I'm guessing most of you are at least working or would have worked for somebody as an employee, right? So here is an example of private information. Imagine Arushi is looking for a job, okay, and applies for a job, and she has a dream job in mind. And then she gets an interview call from the dream job. Now, wouldn't it be really wonderful if Arushi has someone who can tell her what are the pet peeves of the interviewer, right? Or what are the topics to avoid with the interviewer? What are the topics to really engage with the interviewer? Because those are things the interviewer likes. That's an example of a private information because it's not normally available on Google, right? Likewise, imagine you're a salesperson, you're an IT salesperson, and your key accounts are, I don't know, the banking industry, right? So let's say ICICI and HDFC, all these are big banks in India, and your key clients are these two banks. Private information would be information that tells you what is the IT strategy of a company like HDFC. They have so much pot of money to invest into IT. What are the big priorities that they have? How are they going to allocate that capital, right? So if you have some insight into that, which is better than what your competition has, then you can actually craft a product or an offering or a value proposition that makes your client look at you more favorably, right? So that's an example again of private information. So access to valuable private information, very important for entrepreneurs. Similarly, access to skills and expertise that you don't have and which is costly for you to acquire. Now, if you think about it for 15, 20 seconds, there's something super important, critical for any valuable private information to flow. Okay? And similarly, there's one ingredient that is required for anyone who has skills and expertise different from you to actually lend that skills and expertise to you. What is that? One critical thing is called trust. Without trust, nothing will flow. Right? So trust is critical. So one of the most important things to think about in your inner circle is there trust in the inner circle. So here is a small exercise that I want to do. I actually do this a lot with a lot of people around the world. What is the test? Imagine you're an entrepreneur. You're running a business. You got into a really sticky situation. So for example, imagine that you've issued a lot of checks and for whatever reason you were not paying attention and you have a big hole in the bank account. Maybe your accountant will ran away with the money or whatever. Imagine you have a big hole in your bank account. It's Sunday night, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and you issued checks. And in India, check bouncing is a criminal offense, last time I checked. Right? So imagine you need $250,000 into your bank account on Monday morning. How many people can you call at 3 o'clock in the morning who will do their utmost to help you out of that sticky situation? Okay, you definitely don't want to call people like this who say that, I don't know who you are, I'm going to come and kill you, right? So clearly you want to call people who will do their utmost to help you. They don't need to have the money themselves. Remember, they don't need to have the money, but they are willing, you know, that they will wake up and move heaven and earth to help you. Maybe they'll put you in touch with somebody else who may have the money, or they can give you some other source of support or do something else. But you know that they're moving heaven and earth to help you. So can you write down how many such people can you call? One important point, because we are an Indian audience, you cannot include your in-laws or your parents or your siblings. Okay, just write it down, and I want you to put it on the chat. How many people did you write down? Put a number, please. Is it 2? Is it 0? Is it 5? Is it 500? Is it 20? What? Write your number. Okay, 2, 1. Keep going. 2, 5. Okay. 5 to 10. Okay, keep going. Anyone else? I think we're almost done. Okay, this is pretty much similar to, I've done this exercise literally with hundreds of people all over the world. Usually the median case would be like, you know, the median response or the modal response would be about 2 to 4. Okay, anybody who's got more than 10, I mean, please talk to Kalalati Sridharan, who has really got 10 or 10 plus or something. So do we need to get this number improved? Yeah, I would say that if you're an entrepreneur, you should think about doubling that number. Because entrepreneurship, very lonely thing, right? You need to have social support. So this is a simple test. How many people can you call at 3 o'clock in the morning who will do their utmost to help you? Now I want you to do one more test, which is slightly different, okay? Which is trying to understand the diversity in your network. So now what I want you to do is to write down your advice network. What do we mean by advice network is write down the names of 5 people. Okay, write down the names of 5 people, or let's say 6 people, doesn't matter. Let's write down the names of 6 people that you go to for important advice about your professional life. Could be anyone. Important point is they should be alive. Human beings are alive that you go to for advice about your professional life. Please write down the 6 names. You're not going to show it to me, okay? So you can write down their actual names, no problem. After you've written down those 6 up to 6 names, by the way, I forgot, this is important. Some of you may only have 2 people you go to for advice, no problem. Write down up to 6 names. Once you've written them down, you don't have to write the names on the chat, Ashish. It's only for you, private. Okay, once you've written down the names on your phone or wherever, now I want you to answer the second question, which is, of the people that you go to for advice, how many of them you think also go to each other? Okay, your best guess. You're not sure, but your best guess. So let me give you an example of this. Okay, imagine, I just made this for fun. Okay, imagine imagine I asked this question to Amitabh Bachchan. Amitabh Bachchan, who are the 6 people you go to for advice? Imagine Amitabh Bachchan gives me these 6 names. Okay, now I'm asking Amitabh Bachchan the next question, which is, Amitabh, give me your best guess of how many of these people also go to each other for advice. In other words, you know, what is Amitabh's best guess on whether Shah Rukh Khan goes to Amir or Akshay or these 2 lovely ladies and this gentleman at the bottom, right? So, for example, if it turns out that Shah Rukh is only going to Amir for advice and not the other 5, so that's 1 out of 6. On the other hand, let's say Akshay is going to Amir Khan for advice, he's going to Shah Rukh for advice, he's also going to Katrina Kaif for advice. So then Akshay is going to 3 out of 6. Right? So like that, in your own case, you've written down 6 names and it is just your guess. It is just your guess. Write down how many of the people that you listed also go to each other for advice. So the maximum number you can give is 6, correct? Imagine I've listed 6 names and all my 6 people also go to each other for advice, then 6 on 6, which is 100%. Arushi may have listed 6 names, or maybe let's say Arushi listed 5 names. And out of those 5 names, only 1 person she believes go to the other 4 for advice. So then it is 1 on 5, 20%. Right? That's telling us a lot about the diversity in the network. It's a very simple exercise. You can do it later. And these have implications for a bunch of other things, which I'm going to talk about just now. So there are some questions here. I don't know. Hang on a minute. I think I'll come back to the question at the end. Okay, so let's come back to the discussion of what is entrepreneurship. And we said it's very easy. All you need to do is spot a good opportunity, which is step 1, and step 2 is execute on the opportunity. But how do you spot good opportunities? How do you spot good opportunities, right? So a lot of us believe that it is good opportunities happen because of solitary genius. That of course happens. I mean, there's always an Albert Einstein who will sit in a dark room and come up with fantastic ideas. But there's also a lot of research which suggests new ideas are often recombination of existing ideas from diverse sources. So the good example I can give you is like, this phone, iPhone, Apple came out with the smartphone, right? Well, the smartphone, none of the technologies in the smartphone was actually new. Okay, all those technologies already existed. The brilliant thing that Steve Jobs and Apple did was bring them together to create what we today call a smartphone. Okay, so they recombined ideas from very different sources because they didn't actually develop, there's very little new technology that was developed in Apple for the smartphone. Okay, they were primarily recombining technologies mainly from within Apple, and also they brought in technologies from outside. So this is a very powerful way to come up with new ideas or new things, recombining existing ideas to create novel ideas, right? So for example, if you look at this network here of Shiv and Ram, Shiv is a big blue dot and Ram is a big red dot. Shiv is connected to very diverse people. The color of the dot tells you the connections of Shiv. He's connected to other blue people who are like him, also to yellow, also to red, also to green, and so on. Whereas Ram, who's red, is mainly connected to other reds like himself and a little bit of some purples and so on. Right? So Ram has a more, a less diverse network, whereas Shiv has a more diverse network. So homogeneous, cohesive network, very good for execution, which is Ram's network. Shiv's network, very good for creating new ideas, novel ideas.